All right, everybody. Hey, I am excited to be here with James Kehoe of CGC Sports Illustrated. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me. We've been talking about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad both of our schedules kind of aligned and we could do this today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So, a little background from my side. I don't know when I discovered your Twitter account. It was over a year ago, I would say. And you're still to this day one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter. You
Oh,
do,
thank you.
yeah, you do kind of sports history, and you are a massive Sports Illustrated collector. Why don't you tell what you do to my audience?
Yeah, so I collect Sports Illustrated, and in the last several years, a comic book company, the number one comic book grading company in the world, CGC, has started grading non-comic magazines. And so I'll give you a little history. So I was a big collector when I was a kid, sports cards and all sorts of stuff. Starting lineups, you remember those little
Of course.
figurines and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff? I had tons of starting lineups, had tons of sports cards, and I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated. But I kind of inherently knew when I was a kid that big ugly mailing label on the cover of the Sports Illustrated was not good. Yeah, that's no good. I mean,
Yeah.
that is crushes the eye appeal.
Yeah.
So so when I was a kid, I grew up outside of Chicago. I was 10 years old when Michael Jordan was drafted by the Bulls, so I was destined to be a huge Michael Jordan fan. So whenever Jordan or another huge athlete that I loved was on the cover, either my mom or I would go out to the grocery store and buy a couple of copies of that Sports Illustrated and save them. And I did that for a bunch of kids. And then, we all grow up and, get married and have a kid and a mortgage and all that stuff. And so my collecting kind of went away. And I was moving a few years ago and going through a bunch of boxes in my basement. And I found all these Sports Illustrated newsstand copies off of the newsstand, no mailing labels on them. And so I started doing some research and I found out that this company called CGC had just started grading them. And ever since then, I've been absolutely hooked. And I absolutely love it. And so let's take a look at one. Actually, let's start since you showed one there. That was a nice vintage one for me. Yes.
Yeah.
This is a great modern cover. So this is Luka Doncic and Trae Young. It's their first Sports Illustrated cover. It was back in October 2021. So this is what it looks like. Nice slab, really sturdy, very similar, just a little bit bigger than the comic slabs that CGC has made famous over the years. But this is what one of the physical pieces actually look like. And so ever since then, I've got a background in content creation. So when I started getting these graded, I was like, you know what? I wonder if anybody else thinks these are cool or if it's just me. And so I've got Twitter and an Instagram and a YouTube channel and all the other social platforms like that, and have been doing that for several years. And it's been a lot of fun watching this hobby grow because it's been growing like crazy. Still tiny compared to comics or sports cards, obviously, and will never be. I mean, graded magazines and graded Sports Illustrated will never be what sports cards is, but the hobby's grown like crazy the last several years. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I have to admit, I don't collect graded Sports Illustrateds, but I'm gonna bring up your channel here. So this
Yeah.
is your YouTube channel. I am endlessly entertained by your unboxing videos. See,
So
first of
it's
all, you have a ton of charisma. It's fun watching you flip them around and seeing the grade for the first time. It's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, I've got a background in content creation, so I've kind of been making content my whole life, and so it just kind of comes second nature to me. And it's funny. I started that YouTube channel doing podcasts and talking about it, and kind of because it is a new hobby, kind of doing educational stuff. Hey, if you're just getting started in it, this is kind of what to be on the lookout for. And then kind of as a one-off, I just did an unboxing video, and it turned out that my unboxing videos were way more popular than anything else in the podcast I was doing. And so yeah, if you check out my YouTube channel, it's like, it's 70-80% unboxing videos, and then 20 or 30% kind of educational stuff about the hobby and tricks and how-tos and that sort of stuff.
Well, I think the unboxing videos are very educational too. I learn a lot about variations or variants of regional variants of
Yep.
covers and things like that you talk about, and you talk about rookie covers. I don't remember if you call them rookie first covers. What do you call them?
First covers are
Yeah.
generally what the hobby, because so let's get into it. So generally, for something to be considered a rookie cover, it has to be their pro cover.
Yeah.
You don't consider you don't consider somebody's college sports card their rookie card. And a lot of these big athletes make their first cover appearance in their college uniform when they're playing college. And so in the graded magazine copy, we generally refer to them as first covers as opposed to rookie covers, but kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So let's actually here, I'm going to bring this up as well, because there is a Michael Jordan college cover, but this would be his rookie cover, right?
So yeah, so that's his third cover overall. His first cover, he was with Sam Perkins in his North Carolina uniform. His second cover was Team USA basketball from the '84 Olympics. This is his first cover in a Chicago Bulls uniform. Sometimes in the hobby, people refer to this as their first pro cover, because there are some athletes like, oh, geez, I think Patrick Ewing was on the cover 5 times while he was in college. I think Bill Walton has the record. Bill Walton was on the cover of Sports Illustrated 8 times while he was playing for UCLA.
What about Kareem?
Kareem was also 5 times.
Okay.
Kareem / Lou Alcindor was also 5 times, just like Patrick Ewing. So generally we refer to this as their first pro cover, and it designates that as such, and kind of lets people know that, hey, this is special, adds a different era of collectability to it.
And what is more collectible, their first cover or their first pro cover?
So this is not me saying. I always like to say, when I give my opinions on this sort of stuff, this is what I see in the market, because I really try and kind of take a step back and what I think is collectible and what I think is cool, and I'll show you some stuff most people probably think is totally stupid. So I always try and speak from the market perspective, and the answer to that is it depends. That Jordan cover, that's his third cover, it's his first pro cover. It sold for $126,000 this summer at Heritage Auctions. It's the highest price ever paid for a copy of Sports Illustrated by a long shot. We don't know if his first cover would be more collectible, because something you got to keep in mind with these Sports Illustrated, the pop counts are really low. Mm-hmm. It's much more like along the pop counts of graded game tickets than it is sports cards. So there is not, CGC does a grading scale to up to 9.8. That's the highest grade they've ever given to a copy of Sports Illustrated.
But is there a 10?
Technically, there's a 9.9 and there is a 10. There are a handful of comics that have gotten grades above 9.8. There has never been a sports magazine that's ever been given a grade above 9.8. And my guess is there probably never will be. And that's because these aren't produced by Sports Illustrated to be collectible and to be kept in good condition. So, I mean, as soon as they leave that printing press, there are flaws and there are damages, and then they have to get boxed up, and then they have to get shipped, and then they have to put on retail stands, and there's just no way that you're going to ever keep something as pristine as it would need to be to get a 10. So there is a 10. It exists in comics. It's never been given to a copy of Sports Illustrated and probably never will be.
Can you get a 9.8 on a one with a subscription label?
You can. So that's a great question. That's something that I'm glad you brought up, subscription and newsstand, because I think it's real important. It's kind of the first thing that everybody who's kind of comes into this hobby needs to know about. So that's an example of a subscription edition. Those are not nearly collectible as newsstand editions, and let's talk about why. Sports Illustrated has come out and said that they have produced, over the years the number varied, but they've produced about 2 to 3 million copies of each issue each week for subscribers. Those are huge,
peak junk wax era
numbers. Peak, yeah. I mean, bigger than junk wax era. I mean, I always, the 91 Ken Griffey Upper Deck card is rumored to have a print run of over 1 million. Sports Illustrated's got to buy 2 to 3 times that. So it's tough for anything where there are millions and millions of them out there for it to be really collectible. So what collectors really want and what investors want are newsstand copies. Never had a mailing label, was sold at retail on the newsstands. However, you can still get subscription issues graded. Technically, the mailing label does not hurt the grade. So CGC does not downgrade you for the mailing label. However, when you get a subscription issue graded, they will put it. I don't have a subscription issue here to really collect them, but they would normally. They would put it on the slab label right there. It would say subscription edition, And then when you go into the CGC census to look at their pop counts, subscription issues and newsstand issues are broken out separately, so you can get a nice accurate pop count of those two different things. So newsstand versus subscription, if you're interested in this hobby, that is the absolute first thing you've got to learn: how to spot them, the difference in collectability, the difference in pricing, how they're listed, how they're slabbed, how they're done in the census, and that sort of stuff. But the mailing label technically does not affect the grade and does not hurt the grade.
Your Wi-Fi is a little in and out on your video. Audio is perfect, but that looked like Larry Bird's first cover, and
it is
just like, you know, I'm a New England guy.
Yeah,
talking to your audience.
Yeah, I pulled this one specifically for you, so I figured you might be. And I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana guy, so we both got some love for this one. But yeah, this is Larry Bird's first Sports Illustrated cover from 1977. He's there in his Indiana State uniform from back when he was in college. Highly collectible. I've got this one graded at an 8.0. Pretty decent grade for this. Pop counts, let's touch on pop counts again, because they're pretty tiny. Newsstand copies of this, I think there are less than 50 of these in the world that have been graded. So again, those are much more along the lines of like graded game ticket numbers. There is not a 9.8. A 9.8 does not exist in this. The highest graded copy in the world is a 9.6, and there's only one of them.
So what would that 8.0 be worth, roughly?
Yeah, this one and pop counts, or I'm sorry, comps are can be really tough to come by, because there are so few of these, and the people that own high grade copies don't sell them a whole lot. They're kind of holding on to them for right now. But this one, if I were to put this up for auction on Heritage, I'd say it's probably a $2,000 to $4,000 piece. Yeah, okay. Probably $2 to $4,000, somewhere in there. Very, very collectible. I did have one that I ended up getting graded for a friend of mine, that he had bought off the newsstand when it came out in 1977, ended up coming back at a 9.0. I ended up helping him sell that in a private sale last year for $9,000. So that gives you kind of an idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think the difference between Sports Illustrated 3 to 4 million or 2 to 3 million, whatever you said, is that a lot of people weren't collecting Sports Illustrated. Like, I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated probably from 1988 to, I don't know, 97 when I went off to college. And I recycled all of those magazines. They weren't collectible. I really wish I had kept them, although they had subscription mailing. But every card I saved, and I saved really carefully and safely. Did a lot of people keep subscription Sports Illustrateds, and is the pop count higher on those?
So yeah, so let's talk about survivability, and everything that I'm going to say is completely anecdotal, because there's no real data to kind of pull this from. But I think it kind of makes sense. The survivability of subscription issues is pretty decent, because it's something that people got to their house every single week, and whether they read it or not, there's a huge population of people that held on to them, and they put them in a stack, and then they boxed them up, or they put them in their room. And a lot of people just don't get rid of stuff and hung on to it. And so there's a really strong survivability of subscription issues. Not only were there more produced, but the ones that were produced tended to survive over the decades more. Newsstand issues, not only were there much fewer produced, and while 2 to 3 million subscription issues were produced each week, SI has said they produced only about 50,000 newsstand editions. But newsstand editions, think of the way a consumer would use a newsstand edition. They generally would buy it because they wanted to, there was something really important in there about an article they wanted to read, or they really love the athlete, or it had to do with something they were doing. They were getting on a plane. They were, they take the train into work every day. And so, they're buying Sports Illustrated every week. They bought it to read it and consume the content. And then usually once that was done, it was gone. And they tossed it away, or they left it on the train, or they left, threw it away at the airport, or whatever they were at. So I think that there's the kind of that double whammy of, yes, there's more subscription issues. I think the survivability of subscription issues is higher. There's fewer newsstand issues. I think the survivability of those newsstand issues is less, if that makes any sense.
So let's talk about survivability, because you also do pressing, which in the card world is very much obviously not pressing, but Describe what pressing is in the magazine and comic book world.
Yeah, so I always say Sports Illustrateds are great. It really is a great marriage of comic books and sports cards, because the collectability is all driven around what sports cards are collected. You know, Mickey Mantle and Michael Jordan and Shohei and Victor Wembanyama and all that sort of stuff. That drives which issues of Sports Illustrated for the most part are collectible. But everything else, as far as the rules for grading and restoration and all that stuff, come from the comic book side of the hobby. And there's something in comic books that's called pressing. And that's essentially where you take a heat press and you put the magazine in the heat press. You do some other things, you add some humidity to it, but it essentially takes out bends, folds, dents, other flaws in the magazine that would normally get you downgraded, can clean them up and get you a better grade. This was debated in the comic book industry 30 years ago when comic books first started grading. And the general consensus is that this is not restoration, because technically you're not adding or subtracting anything from the piece as it was originally. And so pressing is fully endorsed by the book community. It's so endorsed that CGC, the comic book grading company, offers a pressing service where CGC will press your magazines for you. So you talk about pressing and improving grades on magazines, and sports card guys, their heads, are ready to pop off there, because that's obviously something that PSA and Beckett have said is not acceptable. And if they catch you doing it, they're going to, label it altered and send it back to you. So that's what pressing is. It's really important. It's really big in comic books. It is translated over into magazines. Again, really important because of the way the consumer, let's take a look at another one. The way the consumer used the product. Sports cards were always made just to be looked at for the most part. Now, back in the 50s, kids stuck them in their bicycle spokes and that sort of stuff. And we've all heard those sorts of stories. But for the most part, you just look at a sports card. You don't play a game with it. You just kind of look at it, you enjoy it, and that sort of stuff. This is a magazine. This is meant to be read. This is meant to be consumed. You're meant to flick through it. You're meant to, get your hands on it and go through every page. Well, all of that sort of stuff creates flaws in the magazine that a lot of them can be pressed out in pressing. And so pressing is really important. I always say, if you care about the grade, you better get your magazine pressed before you get it graded. So this is, by the way, Victor Wembanyama's first Sports Illustrated came out in March of this year. Obviously, highly collectible, and everybody wanted that. And this one's graded at 9.8. Kind of fun.
So you're going, where do you get a newsstand Sports Illustrated nowadays? There are no newsstands.
Yeah, it's tough. So me in my area, I really can only source them at Barnes and Noble, and even then, it's difficult. I've got about 4 or 5 Barnes and Nobles in my metro area, but they're difficult to find. There's some grocery stores that sell them. There's some Walgreens and CVS that'll sell them. It really is a store by store decision. I can tell you that they're pretty tough to find. Generally, got to go to a big box bookseller like Barnes and Noble to get them. The other challenge is people leaf through them when they're on the newsstand. So yeah, pull from the back. So it's difficult. But I probably look like a psychopath standing at the magazine rack at Barnes and Noble because I grabbed a stack of Sports Illustrateds and I'm looking on the spine of all of them because I'm not buying the ones that people have already beat up and the ink is coming off on the corners. And I'll spend 10 minutes going through all 20 copies that they've got there and pull out the 2 or 3 that are in the best shape, and those are the ones I buy. So don't get this idea that just because you buy it from Barnes and Noble, that must be mint, that it's going to be a 9.8. No, far from it. They're still tough to come by, even straight off the magazine rack.
It's like going to a card show and you pick up a card and you've got to inspect it, you turn it all over and see. Yeah. But it's normal at a card show, not necessarily.
Right. It's not normal at the magazine rack at Barnes and Noble while people are drinking their Starbucks coffee and read a book next to me. And like I said, looking at me like I'm an idiot, but I'm good with that. But yeah, it's tough to get issues that will ever be a 9.8 off the newsstand. But it's tough to get that too when you open up a pack of sports cards. I mean, not every sports card coming straight out of the pack, has a chance at PSA 10. There are quality control issues at all of these places, and they don't all end up being shipped in perfect condition.
And you're on your Twitter account. I'll try to remember. I'm really bad at remembering adding links into my descriptions on my videos, but I'm going to try to remember to add links to your YouTube and your Twitter. Uh, you will often post a picture of a cover that has a bend in it or something, both pre-pressing and post-pressing, and you'll have a guess of, this looked like a 7.5 and now it looks like a 9.2. And then you'll also estimate, I think, if I remember correctly, what the value might be for a high, although maybe not. I'm just trying to remember. But anyway, you're very good at pressing these magazines. And I went and I looked at your prices. It's shockingly reasonable to get this
Oh,
pressed, especially considering it's like 24 hours in a press, right?
yeah, so and I've got some of these. I've got some videos that explain what pressing is and how I do it on my YouTube channel and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you take a magazine, you heat it up to the appropriate temperature. Which, by the way, the temperature that the heat press should be varies on the age of the magazine. Modern magazines can't take a high amount of heat. Vintage magazines from the 50s and 60s can tolerate a lot more heat. But the modern magazines can't. So there's a lot of really specific, intricate, knowledgeable details as to the specifics of it. And I've been doing it for years and years, and just kind of have that knowledge. But yeah, I know what to look for. I know what flaws to look for on a magazine. I know which ones can be fixed by pressing and which can't. And I know the market pricing pretty well too. So it's funny. I have this. It's funny you mentioned that about my Twitter, because I actually have one in drafts that I haven't posted yet. So somebody sent me a copy of Michael Jordan's first Sports Illustrated from 1983, and it was graded at 5.5. And he could tell that there were flaws by looking at the slab that could be fixed by pressing. And so he wanted me to crack it out of the slab, press it, and resubmit it. And it's funny, I go into the detail that you talked about. I have photos of the before and after pictures of how I could fix them, and projected that this 5.5 is probably now going to grade it probably a 6.5 or a 7. And my customer who sent this to me, will easily double the value of this magazine. A 5.5 Michael Jordan first cover in Newsstand, probably worth $3,000. A 7.0 Michael Jordan Newsstand is worth $6,000 or $7,000. So for him, I was able to, for a very reasonable price, take a piece that he has and gonna, increase his asset several $1,000s in value.
PSA upcharges based on value. Do you do that?
I don't, and maybe I should. Mike, I do this because it's fun.
Yeah.
And so I offer my customers a flat fee for pressing. I offer a flat fee for cracking them out and that sort of stuff. Whether it's a no-name cover from 2018 that's not even worth, after it gets graded, it won't even be worth what you spent getting it pressed and graded. To I pressed the only Mike Tyson Sports Illustrated first cover from 1986 that's graded at 9.8. That's easily a $50,000. That's easily a $50,000 magazine. There's one in the world. Pressed it for a customer of mine. He's a good friend of mine, and I've pressed a ton of his stuff over the years, and he's got an amazing collection. But I charge him the same $40 that I would have charged for pressing Bryce Young's first cover from earlier this year, which everybody was really hot on until the season started.
Let's talk about
But
this
yeah,
one first.
I don't charge by value. I just try and keep it simple and just try to do right by my customers.
So this morning, this morning you posted this Sports Illustrated for Kids magazine, which I'm familiar with because I'm a Sports Illustrated for Kids card collector. I
Yep.
love those cards. And
Yep.
inside this magazine is Tiger Woods' first Sports Illustrated for Kids card. This is from '96. On the cover is Larry Johnson, who
Yep.
is most famous for his 3-point celebration where he would do the L with his arms, which I loved as a kid.
That, and if you remember his Reebok commercials where he was Grandmama,
Grandmama,
where he dressed
yes.
up as his grandma in the wig and was
Yes.
dunking as an old lady. Those were hilarious. Yeah.
So why would this be collectible? Why would anybody want this graded if the whole purpose of the magazine nowadays, almost 30 years later, is inside the magazine?
You know, it's funny you asked that, Mike, because and I get it. It makes sense because when sports card guys first look at Sports Illustrateds and magazines, there are so many whys. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? And I get it because it's brand new and it's different. I would look at getting this magazine graded. It's the same thing as getting a wax pack graded. I get a pack of tops from 1972 unopened, sent to PSA, and get it graded. There are tons of people that do that.
Yeah, you're right.
This is a very decent analogy to that. So the Tiger Woods card is on the inside. I'm getting the entire package graded, and just like if somebody buys a PSA graded piece of wax from 1972 tops, they can either keep it like that or they can crack it open and rip it. Same thing. You can buy this Larry Johnson Sports Illustrated for kids, or you can crack it open and try and pull that Tiger Woods card out of there.
Do you collect other magazines?
I do, and I've actually got a bunch here. So let's go through.
I'll show you the one I want the most.
Oh yeah, show me.
Not in this grade because this is not affordable. But
yeah. I tell you what, I really missed the boat on Nintendo Power because you could have bought these things 3 years ago for next to nothing. And they've gone crazy. And yeah, this is the first copy of Nintendo Power, and it's a very specific version of this copy that was just sent to the Nintendo Fan Club subscribers. It's graded at 9.8, sold for six figures earlier this year. Those are cool. Those are cool. Yeah, so did I. I mean, I had all of those because you needed the strategy guides. No, it wasn't in 9.8 because I ripped all the maps out of mine. And I was had that Zelda map right next to my controller because there was no way I was going to win that game without some help. But yeah, I mean, anything that's nostalgic and it makes sense. Graded video games have taken off. Why wouldn't ancillary pieces around that take off? So so this is new for me, and this is absolutely one of my favorites. So this is Steve Jobs' first appearance on Time magazine from 1982. You'll see a ton of them out there that are in subscription. Extremely rare to find in Newsstand. Extremely rare to find in good condition. This is a pop one with none graded higher. Highest graded copy of this in the world right now. So I do think I do like outside of sports. I do like a number of pop culture things. I do collect some pop culture figures, historical figures. I've got a Time magazine with Einstein on the cover, one with Winston Churchill graded, John F. Kennedy's inauguration. So other historical and political figures that have been on covers throughout the years. But this is a new one, and I wanted to show it off because that Steve Jobs first appearance from 1982 is very cool. I've got a couple other. Oh, let's look at this one. I love this one. So this is Slam magazine. So Slam magazine is
Slam.
We all loved Slam in the mid 90s. I mean, mid 90s basketball was, for guys our age, that was as good as it got. That was peak NBA, and we loved our NBA back then. So this is the sixth copy. This is Slam number 6. So this is the sixth issue Slam ever put out. Came out in 1995. It's Michael Jordan's first cover appearance on Slam. It's graded at 9.8. Again, this is a pop one with none graded higher. And I'm a big Jordan guy, and I bought this off of Heritage a couple of years ago and snapped it up for what I think is an incredible price because it's a unique, one-of-a-kind item in this grade. So Slam magazine, very popular and very collectible. I can tell you, for the most part, again, a young hobby. It's growing like crazy. 95% of the hobby is Sports Illustrated. And I think anything outside of Sports Illustrated, for the most part, is pretty speculative at this point. But who knows where the hobby... Hey, 3 years ago, Nintendo Power was speculative. And now people are paying crazy prices for copies of Nintendo Power. But I would say... No, go ahead. I would say if you're interested in collecting, I would stick to the major publications. I collect Sports Illustrated. I do a little bit of Slam, Time Magazine, Newsweek. I don't really go into, there were so many sports publications. I don't really get into Sport Magazine or Baseball Digest or Sporting News or Street and Smiths or any of those sorts of publications. And there are people that do, and that's fine. I just kind of stick to those well-known, highly reputable publications for the most part.
Let's talk about autographs, because I'm an autograph collector. And the first time I think I tweeted at you, it must have been close to a year ago.
Yeah.
I said, how do autographs work in this world? Because I have autographed Sports Illustrated, but I also have the very first Beckett autographed by Dr. Jim Beckett, right there.
That's awesome.
And I had to
That's
get it great. It's a
piece.
Beckett on Beckett in Beckett. And your response to me was that autographs are treated as defects.
Yeah, we could talk for an hour about this. How do autographs work with CGC? They don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. So CGC does not recognize, does not do in-house authentication, and they don't recognize third-party authenticators like PSA, JSA, and Beckett. So essentially, if you've got an autograph, it is a defect. And keep in mind, before Sports Illustrateds were graded, the biggest group of Sports Illustrated collectors were autograph collectors who preferred Sports Illustrated as the autograph medium. Those guys have been around for a long time, 20, 30 years, to where that's a fairly big community.
The Scott guy that I follow on Instagram, Scott S.I. King.
Yeah. Scott is very well known in that community, and there's several other guys, and they're good guys and a lot of fun and all that sort of stuff, but different. So CGC treats them as a defect. So you'll either get a green qualified label, which the green qualified label at CGC means there's something wrong with this, or you can request the standard label and have them downgrade you for the autograph, usually anywhere from 1 to 2 full points. So it's kind of a bummer. The reason CGC does that is they have their own proprietary signature program that they call their Signature Series. And let's talk about that. So for something to qualify for Signature Series, these are done at comic book shows for the most part. Because keep in mind, 99.9% of what CGC does is comic books. They are a comic book company. They really don't care about sports magazines. They tolerate us, and we're this much of their business. Why would you care about us? They're a huge multi-million-dollar company, and sports magazines is nothing compared to all they do with comic books. So typically at Comic-Cons and that sort of stuff. So for something to qualify for Signature Series, a CGC Signature Series facilitator and witness must be present, must actually witness that individual signing that item, and then you do not get that item back. CGC, the facilitator takes that, holds it, sends it off to CGC for grading, and they send it back to you. So I kind of like the Signature Series program because it is very rigorous, and it's as close to a 100% authentication as you will ever get as far as autographs go. But they're a comic book company, so they don't send their facilitators and their witnesses to sports card shows. So in the tens and tens and tens of thousands of Sports Illustrateds that have been graded, there are less than 40 Signature Series pieces because they're so difficult to get. But I'm going to show you one. And there's a big story behind this, so hang on to it for it. So just hang on. Stay with me on this.
McGuire.
Mark McGuire. So this is Mark McGuire's 70th home run. Sports Illustrated came out in 1998 when he hit his 70th home run. Great. This is the yellow label. Yellow label means this is Signature Series, and there's the autograph right there. But that is not Mark McGuire's autograph. That is Todd McFarlane's autograph. Todd McFarlane, who's a big comic book guy, infamously paid $3 million for Mark McGuire's 70th home run ball. And here we are, 25 years later, and it's still the most money anybody has ever paid for a baseball memorabilia. Way overpaid for it, obviously. And so he was doing an in-house signing at CGC, and everybody was sending in their, Spider-Man and Spawn books, because those were, things that Todd McFarlane worked on. And I was like, that's boring to me. Why not send something in that is, talks about his infamous overpayment for this Mark McGuire ball? And I actually thought, I was pretty sure that they were going to send this back to me and he wasn't going to sign it. So I give Todd McFarlane all the props in the world for being a good sport about it. But this is, Todd McFarlane signing this. This is the only autographed copy of this, in the world, because like I said, there's only 40 Sports Illustrateds that have qualified for Signature Series, and you'll never be able to see this, but it gives the information on the slab. It says signed by Todd McFarlane on December 7th, 2022. So good labeling and good information
really
on
cool.
the slab. But that's how autographs work at CGC. It's a problem for us sports collectors. But when you can get one, it's awesome. I'm going to show you two more, which this is something I didn't know. Wrestling guys go to Comic-Cons all the time. And I guess that the Venn diagram of comic fans and wrestling fans kind of have a lot of overlap, I guess. Yeah, so this one was fun. This is Ron Simmons on WCW magazine. This is from 1992. So I got Ron Simmons in a signature series. And what's really cool about that is, he thought this was the coolest thing in the world. He talked to me for like 15 minutes. He was like, I haven't seen this magazine since it came out. I used to have stacks of these in my garage. I don't think I have any of them anymore. He wanted to talk to me about the day they did the photo shoot for this. Normally guys go up there and they just want their photo with them, or a signed 8x10 glossy, or maybe a wrestling card. They don't show up with magazines. So he inscribed it, First Black Champion, 1992, and Hall of Fame 2012. So that one's fun. And then one more signature series that I've got, and this is Lex Luger from the same Comic-Con. This is his first Pro Wrestling Illustrated cover from 1988. He had just won God, I can't remember what league he was back in then. Anyway, whichever league he was fighting for, he won the championship right before that. So Lex Luger's first Sports Illustrated, or first Pro Wrestling Illustrated cover, rated at 9.6. So a couple of fun signature series pieces there, but autographs are complicated. That's a long-winded story to say autographs are complicated.
I was into wrestling for one weekend as a kid when I went and spent the weekend at my cousin's house, and the three of them were big into wrestling. And for that weekend, we watched a ton of wrestling stuff, and I was into the Ultimate Warrior, but I don't remember anything about him or about wrestling. I just remember that fact.
Yeah, I had a 4 or 5 year stretch from when I was like 12 to 17 or whatever, when I thought wrestling was cool, and I was fortunate enough that was Hogan and Randy Savage and Andre the Giant and Ultimate Warrior and all those guys. It was the heyday of wrestling, in my opinion. It was fantastic. It was fun.
So if I ask you an athlete, what are the chances you know their first cover without looking it up?
Without looking, I'd probably know the year. I don't know. I'll give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Well, you got one?
I do, because I just bought one autographed 5 minutes before we started here. So
okay.
First Sue Bird cover.
Oh, that one I don't know. Is it a Sports Illustrated?
It is. First,
and it's a regular Sports Illustrated, not an SI for kids.
It's a special commemorative issue.
Okay, so the commemorative issues I don't know as well. That one I don't know. That's a tough one. You hit me with Sue Bird. Man, yeah. I thought you were going to give me like a Mantle or even a Ted Williams or something like that. You get me with a Sue Bird. That one's pretty cool. Huskies in 2002.
Yeah, and it's also signed by Rebecca Lobo and Swin Cash. When they won, they had that perfect season. Yep. I couldn't resist. I mean, $34 for a beautiful Sports Illustrated commemorative issue, autographed on the cover by Sue Bird. How do you say no to that?
I think that you stole that one. I think female athletes are very underrated in the collectible world, whether it's WNBA or it's soccer or whatever. I think long term, the athletes like Sue Bird are going to be exponentially more collectible 20 years from now than they are today. I think long term, those guys are way underrated.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah. So,
all right, you got to give me another athlete. I can't go out on the Sue Bird one.
That was a tough one.
I'll
give you an easy one to LeBron.
Oh, LeBron's 2002, February 18th, 2002. Yeah, that one's pretty easy and very
And the headline on the cover was
The Chosen One.
Yeah.
Which so what I love about that is 2002 is kind of peak Harry Potter. That's no accident that they were using The Chosen One. I mean, that's when the Harry Potter movies were just, I mean, banging up the box office, and everybody was reading the books and all that sort of stuff. And Harry Potter was called The Chosen One, and that is no accident that they used that phrase on that LeBron cover. I'm convinced that was a Harry Potter derivative there.
But they also used The Chosen One on who else? Mike Trout, was it?
They used Bryce Harper.
Bryce Harper, that's right.
It was Bryce Harper's first cover. Sports Illustrated's got a nasty habit of reusing headlines over the years and sometimes decades. And I haven't decided yet whether it's lazy on their part or if it's kind of a cool callback to the others. Like A Star Is Born, that Michael Jordan first Bulls cover from 1984 that you had pulled up earlier. The headline is A Star Is Born. They've used that probably 5 or 6 times over the last 50 or 60 years for headlines on covers for various athletes. So well, very common.
In the last 4 or 5 years, it's probably out of laziness, just because they gutted their newsroom 4 or 5 years ago. Yes. Now they're using AI to write articles. They were just outed as recently. Yeah. How does that type of thing? I imagine that wouldn't hurt the values. A recent controversy with Sports Illustrated can't hurt the nostalgic values of a first Jordan, right?
No, absolutely not. I think that you talk to a lot of people, they'd be surprised that Sports Illustrated still produces a physical magazine.
I am.
And so when Sports Illustrated's in the news for something like, their controversy the last couple of weeks about generating, AI reporters, keeps the product top of mind. And so I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, and certainly doesn't hurt the collectability of anything. Sports Illustrated was purchased by a venture capital group in 2019, I believe. And it's interesting. They were very transparent about it. They didn't care about the magazine. They didn't care about the website or anything. They wanted the Sports Illustrated brand name so that they could license it. They've done it, and they've done that. And actually, the only reason why Sports Illustrated, the magazine and the news content generating website, is around today is because this venture capital group bought the company and figured out a way to leverage that Sports Illustrated brand name and license it to be able to prop up the sports journalism part of the business, or else they would have been cooked. I mean, there's a Sports Illustrated sports book. There's Sports Illustrated clothing. There's Sports Illustrated. They've really rolled it out, and they've been very successful with it. And it was a good business move on their part. So I'm glad they did that, because the magazine is still being produced today because they found a way to make money on the brand name.
Yeah, it's kind of why Bill Watterson never wanted to do anything with Calvin and Hobbes. Branding Calvin and Hobbes, because he knew that it would turn into everything would be Calvin and Hobbes, and there would be bumper sticker. Well, of course, it turned out that way, but
and if you're an artist like Bill Watterson is, that's detrimental to your art. When you're a capitalist, like a venture capital firm, all you want to do is make money. And in this case, I'm happy they did, because the magazine would have gone away if they hadn't.
Yep. This is really good stuff. We talked about other magazines. What's your favorite? The favorite that you have?
Yeah, so I mean, I love that Mark McGuire signed by. I love the goofy oddball stuff. I can pull out my Michael Jordan first cover, or here's another one. This is popular. This is the first copy of Sports Illustrated from August 1954, graded at 9.8. Yeah. So there's popular ones like that. It's those goofy oddball ones. That Todd McFarlane autographed Mark McGuire, I'm pretty proud of, and that one's fun. I've got an issue that and I don't have it pulled, but it's Michael Jordan 1992, right after they won their second NBA championship and beat the Portland Trail Blazers. My mom bought it for me. My mom went out to the grocery store because she knew that was on the cover, and she bought it for me. And I saved it for 30 years and got it graded, and it ended up getting a 9.8. So I've got a sentimental ones that my mom had bought for me. So I love that one. This one's kind of interesting. I love goofy stuff, and I love goofy stuff, and I love stories. And that's why I think I focus on a lot of the history on my Twitter account and that sort of stuff, because they're great stories. So this is a Magic Johnson, Sports Illustrated. It's from 1991. Great looking cover. just the word magic. He's got a little sky hook going on there. It's a popular cover, but what's different about this, and you can't read it, this is a printing error supplement. So I was always fascinated by error cards when I was a kid in sports cards. Of course, Billy Ripken was, when I think I was, 11 or 12 when that came out, and to a 12-year-old, that's the funniest thing in the world. Even to a 40-something-year-old guy, it's still funny. This is a printing error supplement. So what happened was when Sports Illustrated produced this magazine, certain regions of the country, they accidentally left out like 8 to 10 pages of the magazine. And so they reproduced it with just those 8 to 10 pages and then sent them out to customers. So this is a printing error supplement. It's super thin. You can't see, but it's only 8 to 10 pages long. That is not the normal back. If you had the normal cover, the back would be totally different. I got CGC to recognize it as a variant, as a printing error supplement. And I think that's cool. This is there's only a couple of these graded, but this is the highest graded one. So this is kind of my nostalgia for those error cards that were so, all the rage during the junk wax era and that sort of stuff.
So where this is so new for everybody, including CGC, how do you get CGC to say, oh yeah, this is a regional variant error?
It's tough. It's really tough. And I've done videos on this on my YouTube channel and talked about it and that sort of stuff. Because CGC won't do it for us. And they're comic book guys that don't know nothing about sports for the most part and don't care about sports for the most part. So if there's a regional variant or there's a first cover or there's something of note, it is up to the collector, the individual, when they submit it in. And I've talked to CGC and there's procedures. They want you to write on the packing slip, handwrite, this is the variant or this is the first cover. And then they want you to put a sticky note on the bag on the cover and say the same thing. And I do that. And I ask nicely, please and thank you and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. So it's been a real battle. Where's that? This is Eddie. That's Eddie Matthews, Hall of Famer, Eddie Matthews. This is obviously his first Sports Illustrated cover because it's the first Sports Illustrated ever produced. I've probably gotten this issue graded 15 or 20 times in the last 5 years. Every time I say, hey, can you put Eddie Matthews Sports Illustrated cover on the slab? They still won't do it. They still refuse to do it, and I don't understand why. But you have to make the request, and sometimes they give you the request, sometimes they don't. The good news is that once they give that request to one person, they'll do it for every other copy they grade. So when somebody requested it for LeBron's first cover, you mentioned that, I've got it sitting around here somewhere. From 2002. So once somebody submitted one and said, hey, this is LeBron's first cover, put that on the slab. Now every single copy of this that gets graded will say first LeBron James Sports Illustrated cover on the slab, and you don't have to do it. Same thing with variants, same things with other stuff like that. There's the chosen one that we were talking about earlier.
So my local card shop has mags. They have the first Sports Illustrated for sale. I think they're trying to sell it for like $250. It's not in good condition. What would you say if, let's say, it would grade a 3.5? What's a good price on the first Sports Illustrated?
At 3.5?
Yeah.
That is not okay. So let's talk about this. So have we? Do you know the story behind the first copy of Sports Illustrated?
I don't.
Have I gone into details about this? Okay, so there's a million. There's tons of them out there. So Sports Illustrated, when they produced that first copy in August 1954, they saved the overruns and stuck them in a warehouse, and they sat in a warehouse for decades. And then some executive in the 90s at Sports Illustrated was like, hey, we've got these boxes in the warehouse not doing anything. Let's put them in a fancy leather binder with a certificate of authenticity and sell them for $300 or $400 to our subscribers. And that's exactly what they did. So there are an incredible amount of copies of the first issue of Sports Illustrated out there, and that warehouse find kind of skews the population report and value. So one at 3.0 is you might get $100 for it, maybe. Copies at 9.8 at the peak a year or two ago were selling for $10,000, even though there's almost 100 of them that exist at 9.8. That pricing has come back down a lot, just because there's so much supply. in the market, and now they go for about $5,000. But you can get a copy of the very first Sports Illustrated from 1954, an 8.0. You probably get that for 150, $200. Very reasonable.
Are you worried that there's going to be a warehouse find of newsstand editions at some point that's going to just wipe out the pop reports?
You know what? I wouldn't say I'm worried about it. It's certainly a possibility. I'm trying to think of an analogy in other collectibles where decades later, a warehouse there's never a warehouse find of 1952 Mickey Mantle Topps cards, or others in that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. As the hobby grows, more supply is going to come into the market because people who saved these that didn't think they were valuable are now all of a sudden going to get them graded. But I think that now that the hobby is 4 or 5 years into itself, we haven't seen anything where the supply of any specific issue has dramatically outstripped the demand to where it's now useless. So we haven't seen that yet, but it's certainly a possibility. It's a possibility with anything. Geez, look at what's going on with Topps, and their Superfractor issue and Fanatics and all of that. My Twitter's been full of that the last couple of days. I think all of quality control and production and all of that stuff is a major issue for these companies. And so far, all of the scandals have been on the sports card side for the most part, and there really haven't been any on the magazine side to date. So
you talked a little bit, very briefly at the beginning of this conversation, about where values were 3 years ago compared to now. Talk about that rise, and where do you see the hobby going in the next 5 years or so?
Man, I hate doing predictions on pricing, but I will because you asked anyway. So, like every other collectible in the world, the pandemic prices went through the roof. I mean, pre-pandemic, the big dollar issues like the first Sports Illustrated, the LeBron first cover, those were the ones that were selling for $2,500, $3,000. 2 years later, both of those peaked around 10 grand. They've both fallen probably 50%. And again, it's more of a supply issue than I think it is a demand issue. The supply of both of those have just outstripped it. I did a podcast on my YouTube channel at the beginning of the year where I made a bunch of predictions for the hobby, which, by the way, almost all of them were completely wrong, including, but that's fine. I have no problem saying that. I'm just doing it for fun. Including the one that I said I did not think that the all-time record price was going to get broken this year. And I couldn't have been more wrong on that because the record price was shattered. So I think what you see in Sports Illustrated and graded magazines is not all that different than what you've seen in other collectibles. Ultra premium pieces will continue to set records. You're still going to see a 52 Topps mantle at SGC 9.5 sell for $12 million, and you're going to see that Babe Ruth card from a couple of weeks ago sell for $7 million. You're going to see records and game worn memorabilia, and you see that on the comic book side. But beyond that, a lot of individual pieces, some have just gotten absolutely destroyed as far as pricing goes. But for the most part, after you get past that top layer, prices are probably 15 or 20% off of their peak. And again, it's specific. Interestingly enough, Tiger Woods Sports Illustrated have fought that and keep going up in price. Not only his first cover from 1996, but pretty much all of his covers. And I don't know why, but I'm fascinated by it. But there's a clear trend where Tiger has delineated himself from the rest of magazine collectors, and Tiger's prices have continued to rise when there's been a lot of softening for other athletes. I'm happy that the hobby hasn't grown too fast. Verticals like graded VHS really had meteoric rises and then just huge crashes. And so I'm glad that I would much rather be the hobby, be in the vertical that is the slow and steady, continued nice growth, growing, and not having that big crash. But magazines have held up pretty well. Comics have really taken it on the chin. They're, again, outside of that top tier, many comics are now below the pandemic pricing. I mean, the prices are below 2019 levels. So that's a problem. If I would look out 5 years from now, I think that I think the newsstand issues are still going to be, superior to subscription issues, but I think there's going to be a low dollar market for subscription issues just because there's no supply of newsstand issues. There's so few of them. I mean, there's less than 40 Larry Bird first covers. There's definitely more people in this, more than 40 people in this hobby that would love to buy a Larry Bird first cover in newsstand. So I think you'll see them supplement it with subscription issues. I think six-figure sales are going to be few and far between, but I think the reason for that is that the people that have those crazy, pop one, none higher are not selling them for the most part. There's a Wayne Gretzky. There's one Wayne Gretzky first cover at 9.8. I know the collector that owns that. He's not selling it ever. The guy that owns the Mike Tyson first cover at 9.8. There's only one of them. I know the guy that owns that. He's not going to sell that. I don't care if he gets $100,000 or $200,000 for it. He's not going to sell it. So when you do see a Michael Jordan first pro cover from 1984 graded at 9.8 come on the market, the first time ever that one of those has come on the market, that's where the ridiculous pricing comes from, and it sells for $126,000. There are two Mickey Mantle first covers at 9.6. They've never been for sale for public. There has not been ever a copy of Mickey Mantle's first cover above 9.0 that's ever sold publicly, ever. There's not been a copy of Michael Jordan's first cover from 1983 above 8.5 that's ever sold publicly. And there's probably a dozen that are above 8.5. So I think that's what you're going to see. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where I see the hobby going in the future, is that the top tier stuff is, when it comes out, it's going to go for a lot of money because you have no idea when it's going to be available again.
Your passion for the hobby is inspiring. I strongly encourage people to go watch your YouTube channel because it's a lot of fun, and your video looks better on your YouTube channel than it does here, thankfully.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it's been a little chunky.
It's okay. Your audio's been perfect, so
good.
One last question that I like to ask all of my guests, and usually it's related to sports cards, but I'm going to ask you about magazines, obviously. What one magazine what's your holy grail, I guess, of a magazine that has eluded you, something that's within your reach affordably, but you just haven't been able to get
it? That's a great question. So I'll tell you. So it's the Mickey Mantle. It's the 1956 Mickey Mantle, very first cover of Sports Illustrated in Newsstand. I've never been able to get a Newsstand copy of that. I actually own a couple of subscription copies of that because I think that is one of the handful of copies that exist where in subscription it's got long-term collectability. But I've never been able to do that. I've bid on some of them. Not many have come up for auction. I've bid on some of them. I've had a shot at some of them for private sale, and my bids have all fallen short, unfortunately. I'll tell you, there's one other. Okay, so I'll tell you my biggest miss. I'm glad you asked this question. I'm kind of glad you asked this question, but this one still hurts. Even though it happened a few years ago, it's still raw. So I'm a big Jordan guy. And right after Kobe Bryant passed away, Heritage had a Michael Jordan Sports Illustrated cover. It was a subscription issue. I think it was graded at like 4.5. Not a good grade. It was Kobe Bryant's personal copy of Sports Illustrated. Had the mailing address label with Kobe Bryant's name and the address he lived at when he was like 13 years old in 1991 when the issue came out. I think it sold for $8,000, about $8,000 on Heritage. I think I probably bid it up to 6,000 or 7,000 and went out. And that one is the most painful loss I've ever had in an auction, because I should have paid whatever it took to get that, because I think that is clearly a one-of-one unique piece. I think it tells an amazing story. We know Kobe, idolized Jordan when he was a kid. We know Kobe, and the fact that it was a poor grade made it even better. Because if it was a 9.8, I mean, Kobe never touched it. No, this was a magazine that Kobe read and read and read again, which is why it wasn't in great condition. If that one ever comes up for auction again, I don't know who bought it. And I know a lot of the collectors in this hobby and who owns what and that sort of stuff. I don't know who bought that one, but I would have a hard time not spending every penny I have to get that if it ever came up for auction again. That one's
probably not a magazine collector, but a Kobe collector.
Probably. That's my
Or a
guess,
Jordan
which
collector,
is why I've never been able to source the person that owns it.
All right. So I don't discuss politics on here, but I do discuss sports politics a little bit. And I think
Okay.
we can both agree the basketball GOAT is Jordan.
I don't even know why people are still talking. It just blows my mind that LeBron stands are still out there making the argument for LeBron. It just makes no sense to me in every way. And they'll sit here and say, "Well, he scored more points." Okay, great. That's fine. Yeah, he beat Kareem, and he's the the scoring champion in the of all time.
Unbelievable
But
career. The
sure,
longevity,
LeBron's great.
amazing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and the fact that he skipped college. Okay,
Right,
great.
exactly.
I mean, LeBron never won a national championship, never won a March Madness.
That's right.
Jordan won that.
Yeah.
So I don't even know why we're still having this debate when it's clearly been Jordan, and man, it's going to be tough to ever eclipse Jordan.
Celtics fan here who grew up on the Bulls because the Celtics were terrible through the 90s.
Yeah,
And I just watched every Bulls game. There were a lot of them on national TV in the 90s.
absolutely.
And I watched every Bulls game and I loved it. I loved him on the Bulls. I watched a lot of his Wizards games, unfortunately.
So did I. I watched a ton of those Wizards games, and some nights he didn't have it, but some nights he still had it, even in that blue Wizards uniform.
Yeah.
Back then.
40 minutes a game.
Jordan was appointment viewing. Stop whatever you did. He had a ton of national games, even outside of the playoffs. TNT would just be covering a game where it was the Bulls versus the Trailblazers in February, and you'd stop what you were doing to watch it because you didn't want to miss it.
Yeah. All right, Jim, thank you so much for being on. Stick around after I finish recording, and everybody click on the description, go subscribe, follow him on Twitter, whatever. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I could do this all day long. Really appreciate you indulging me in this fun this evening. Appreciate it, man.
I enjoyed it a lot.